Welcome to another soothing journey through the annals of history. Tonight, we'll explore the surprising daily life of a Spartan warrior, delve into the intricacies of medieval castle construction, and uncover the fascinating world of ancient Egyptian farming techniques. As we traverse these historical landscapes, let the gentle flow of information lull you into a peaceful slumber. Our first tale takes us to ancient Sparta, where we'll discover the unexpected routines of their famed warriors. Later, we'll journey to the misty hills of medieval Europe, where stone fortresses rose from the earth. Finally, we'll conclude our historical lullaby along the fertile banks of the Nile, where ancient Egyptians cultivated their crops with ingenious methods. So lie back, close your eyes, and let the whispers of history guide you towards a restful night's sleep. Our voyage through time begins now. As we delve into the daily life of a Spartan warrior, prepare to be lulled into a peaceful slumber by the monotonous routines and rigid discipline that define their existence. Our journey begins in ancient Sparta, a city-state renowned for its formidable military prowess and austere lifestyle. The day of a Spartan warrior typically began before dawn, as the first rays of sunlight barely touched the horizon. Rising from their sparse sleeping quarters, these soldiers embraced a life of simplicity and hardship from the moment they opened their eyes. Upon waking, the Spartan warrior would immediately begin their morning rituals. These were not elaborate affairs, but rather efficient and purposeful routines designed to prepare them for the rigorous day ahead. The warrior would start by splashing cold water on their face, a stark reminder of the harsh realities they faced daily. Next, they would don their simple clothing, typically consisting of a chiton, a basic tunic made of coarse wool. This garment was functional rather than fashionable, reflecting the Spartan ethos of valuing practicality over luxury. Over this, they might wear a hammadion, a cloak that served as both additional clothing and a blanket during colder nights. Following their dressing, the Spartan warrior would partake in a modest breakfast. This meal was far from lavish, often consisting of a porridge-like dish called maza, made from barley meal, olive oil, and sometimes cheese. This simple fare was designed to provide sustenance without indulgence, reinforcing the Spartan ideal of self-discipline and moderation. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the warrior would join their fellow Spartans for the day's primary activity, military training. This was not merely a part of their routine, it was the very essence of their existence. The Spartan society was built on the foundation of military excellence, and every aspect of their lives revolved around honing their combat skills. The training grounds, known as the agoj, were a hub of constant activity. Here, Spartan warriors engaged in a variety of exercises designed to strengthen their bodies and sharpen their minds. The air would be filled with the sounds of clashing weapons, grunts of exertion, and the occasional shout of instruction or encouragement. One common exercise was wrestling, a sport that the Spartans held in high regard. Warriors would grapple with one another, their bodies glistening with sweat as they sought to overpower their opponents. This activity not only built physical strength, but also taught valuable lessons in strategy and quick thinking. Another crucial aspect of their training was weapons practice. Spartan warriors would spend hours perfecting their skills with the spear, sword, and shield. They would practice thrusting, parrying, and maneuvering in formation, their movements becoming so ingrained that they could execute them flawlessly even in the chaos of battle. The Spartan shield, or aspes, was of particular importance. Made of wood and covered with a thin layer of bronze, it was heavy and cumbersome, weighing around 30 pounds. Yet Spartan warriors were expected to wield it with grace and precision. They would practice shield drills, learning to use this defensive tool as an offensive weapon as well. As the morning wore on, the intensity of the training would increase. The warriors would engage in mock battles, simulating real combat scenarios. These exercises were not for the faint of heart. Injuries were common, and the line between training and actual warfare often blurred. The Spartans believed that the more one sweated in training, the less they would bleed in battle. Amidst the clang of metal and the thud of bodies hitting the ground, instructors would prowl the training grounds, their keen eyes watching for any sign of weakness or lack of discipline. These seasoned veterans were quick to correct any mistakes, often employing harsh methods to ensure that lessons were learned and never forgotten. As midday approached, the warriors would pause their training for a brief respite. This break was not a time for relaxation, but rather a moment to refuel their bodies for the challenges ahead. The midday meal, much like breakfast, was simple and utilitarian. It might consist of barley bread, figs, and perhaps a small portion of meat if available. During this meal, Spartan warriors would often gather in their syssisha, or communal mess. These were not merely dining halls, but important social institutions where bonds between warriors were forged and strengthened. Here, they would discuss tactics, share stories of past battles, and reinforce the values that defined Spartan society. The conversations in the Sissisha were typically serious and focused on matters of military importance. Frivolous talk or excessive mirth was frowned upon, as the Spartans believed that such behavior could lead to a softening of their warrior spirit. Instead, they engaged in debates about strategy or listened to tales of heroic deeds performed by their ancestors. After their brief meal, the warriors would return to their training with renewed vigor. The afternoon sessions often focused on endurance and stamina building. Long runs across the rugged Laconian landscape were common, with warriors carrying their full array of equipment. These grueling exercises not only built physical resilience, but also mental toughness. As they ran, the warriors would chant in unison, their voices echoing across the hills. These chants, often praising the glory of Sparta or recounting the deeds of fallen heroes, served to boost morale and reinforce their shared identity as defenders of their city-state. Another important aspect of their afternoon training was the practice of the phalanx formation. This tight, interlocking arrangement of shields and spears was the backbone of Spartan military tactics. Warriors would spend hours perfecting their ability to move as one cohesive unit, their shields overlapping to create an impenetrable wall. The discipline required to maintain the phalanx was immense. Each warrior had to trust implicitly in his comrades, knowing that a single weak link could spell disaster for the entire formation. They practiced marching in step, pivoting as one, and holding their ground against simulated enemy charges. As the sun began its descent towards the horizon, the intensity of the training would gradually decrease. However, this did not mean that the day's lessons were over. The early evening hours were often devoted to more cerebral pursuits, albeit still focused on warfare. Spartan warriors would gather to study military history, analyzing past battles and discussing the strategies employed by great commanders. They would pore over maps, debating the best ways to defend their territory or launch offensives against potential enemies. This intellectual training was considered just as important as physical prowess in shaping a well-rounded warrior. As darkness fell, the Spartan warrior's day was far from over. Evening meals were taken in the Sissisha once again, where the bonds of brotherhood were further cemented through shared experiences and communal dining. The fare remained simple, often consisting of the infamous black broth, a soup made from pork, blood, salt, and vinegar. While unappetizing to outsiders, this dish was a source of pride for the Spartans, embodying their ethos of austerity and hardiness. After the evening meal, Spartan warriors might engage in more relaxed activities, though always with an eye towards maintaining their martial skills. They might practice throwing the javelin by moonlight, hunting their accuracy in low-light conditions. Others might engage in quiet conversations, sharing wisdom passed down through generations of Spartan soldiers. As the night deepened, the Spartan warrior would finally retire to their sleeping quarters. These were far from luxurious, often consisting of little more than a simple pallet on the ground. The warrior would lay down, their body aching from the day's exertions, yet their mind alert and ready for whatever challenges the next day might bring. And so, as we conclude this first part of our exploration into the daily life of a Spartan warrior, we find that their existence was one of constant preparation, unwavering discipline, and steadfast dedication to their craft. From dawn to dusk, every action, every thought was focused on becoming the perfect soldier, ready to defend Sparta at a moment's notice. As we delve deeper into the daily life of a Spartan warrior, we find that their existence was far from the glamorous, battle-filled life often portrayed in popular media. In fact, much of their time was spent in rather mundane activities that might surprise you. Let's begin with their sleeping arrangements. Contrary to what you might expect from fierce warriors, Spartan men didn't enjoy the luxury of private bedrooms or comfortable mattresses. Instead, they slept in communal barracks, sharing space with their fellow soldiers. These barracks were simple structures, often made of wood, with little to no decoration. The sleeping area consisted of hard pallets on the floor, covered with thin mats made from reeds or straw. Blankets were minimal, usually just a single woolen cloak that served as both bedding and clothing. This Spartan environment, pun intended, was designed to toughen the warriors and foster a sense of unity among the men. Waking up at dawn was a daily ritual for Spartan warriors. The day would begin with a cold bath, regardless of the weather. This practice was believed to harden the body and strengthen the immune system. After their brisk morning wash, the warriors would dress in their simple chiton, a basic tunic made of wool or linen. Breakfast, like all meals in Sparta, was a simple affair. The main staple was a dish called melas zomos, or black broth. This was a soup made primarily from boiled pig's legs, blood, salt, and vinegar. While it might not sound appetizing to our modern palates, this high-protein meal was designed to provide sustenance and energy for the day ahead. Following breakfast, the warriors would gather for their daily training sessions. These weren't always the intense combat drills we might imagine. Much of their training focused on physical fitness and endurance. They would engage in activities such as running, wrestling, and throwing the discus or javelin. An interesting aspect of their training was the emphasis on dance. Yes, you heard that correctly. Spartan warriors were expected to be proficient dancers. This wasn't just for entertainment. Dance was seen as a way to improve agility, coordination, and teamwork. The warriors would perform complex choreographed movements in full armor, which served as both a training exercise and a display of their skills. Between training sessions, Spartan warriors had various duties to attend to. These could include maintaining their weapons and armor, which was a time-consuming task. Their bronze armor required regular polishing to prevent rust, and their weapons needed to be sharpened and oiled. Another significant part of their day was spent on agricultural work. Despite their reputation as full-time soldiers, Spartan warriors were also landowners and farmers. They were expected to manage their estates and oversee the helots, the state-owned slaves who worked the land. This could involve tasks such as supervising planting and harvesting, managing livestock, or overseeing the production of olive oil and wine. Education was an ongoing process for Spartan warriors, even into adulthood. They would gather to discuss philosophy, strategy, and politics. These discussions were often held in a format similar to the Socratic method, with older, more experienced warriors posing questions and challenges to the younger men. An important daily ritual for Spartan warriors was the syssisha, or communal mess. This was more than just a meal. It was a crucial social and political institution. Warriors were divided into mess groups of about 15 men, and they were expected to dine together every evening. Each member contributed a portion of food and wine to the communal meal. The syssisha was a time for bonding, discussing military matters, and reinforcing social hierarchy. The conversation was often focused on matters of state or military strategy. Younger warriors were expected to listen and learn from their elders, speaking only when spoken to. This daily gathering helped to strengthen the bonds between warriors and reinforce the collective mindset that was so crucial to Spartan military success. Despite their reputation for austerity, Spartan warriors did have some leisure time. They enjoyed hunting, an activity that was seen as both recreation and practical training for warfare. Boar hunting was particularly popular as it required skill, bravery, and teamwork, all qualities valued in battle. Another popular pastime was a ball game called Ipiskiros. This game, which involved two teams trying to throw a ball over the heads of the opposing team, was quite rough and was said to improve agility and toughness. It's sometimes considered an early precursor to modern rugby or American football. As evening approached, Spartan warriors would once again gather for their communal meal. After dinner, they might engage in more philosophical discussions or participate in music and poetry recitals. Contrary to the image of Spartans as uncultured brutes, they actually placed great value on musical and poetic ability. Warriors were expected to be able to play the aulos, a reed instrument similar to an oboe, and to recite poetry, particularly the works of Homer. Before retiring for the night, Spartan warriors would often spend time in the company of their wives and children. Despite the emphasis on military life, family was important in Spartan society. Warriors were expected to marry and produce children to ensure the continuation of the Spartan state. However, they didn't live with their families full-time until they retired from active military service at the age of 60. As we can see, the daily life of a Spartan warrior was a complex balance of military training, civic duty, and surprisingly ordinary tasks. While their lifestyle was undoubtedly tough by our standards, it wasn't solely focused on warfare. The Spartan system aimed to create well-rounded citizens who were not only formidable in battle, but also capable of managing their affairs and contributing to their society in times of peace. This glimpse into the daily life of a Spartan warrior reveals a society that was far more nuanced than often portrayed. Their strict discipline and communal living fostered a unique culture that valued physical prowess, intellectual development, and civic responsibility in equal measure. It's a reminder that even in societies we think we understand well, there's always more to discover beneath the surface. As we transition from our exploration of historical facts to our soup stories, I want you to take a moment to settle in. Find a comfortable position, whether you're lying in bed or reclining in a cozy chair. Let your body sink into the surface beneath you, releasing any tension you might be holding. Take a deep breath in through your nose, feeling your chest and belly expand. Hold it for a moment and then slowly exhale through your mouth. As you breathe out, imagine all the stress and worries of the day leaving your body. Repeat this a few times, focusing on the rhythm of your breath. Now, as we prepare to delve into our sleep stories, I want you to picture yourself in a peaceful, tranquil setting. Perhaps you're lying on a soft, warm beach, listening to the gentle lapping of waves. Or maybe you're in a quiet forest glade, surrounded by tall trees and the soft chirping of birds. Whatever scene brings you comfort, allow it to form in your mind. Feel the sensations associated with this place, the warmth of the sun, the cool breeze on your skin, or the soft grass beneath you. Let this imagery help you transition into a state of relaxation and calm. In a moment, we'll begin our first sleep story. These tales are designed to be soothing and engaging, but not so exciting that they'll keep you awake. Instead, they'll gently guide your mind towards sleep, allowing you to drift off naturally as you listen. Remember, there's no pressure to stay awake for the entire story. If you find yourself drifting off, that's perfectly fine. That's exactly what these stories are designed to do. Let yourself be carried along by the words, allowing your mind to wander and your consciousness to slowly fade. As we begin, this change in pace and tone will help signal to your body that it's time to rest. If at any point you feel you need to adjust your position or take a break, feel free to do so. This is your time for relaxation and sleep. Now take one more deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. Feel your body becoming heavy and relaxed. Let your eyelids gently close if they haven't already. As I begin our first sleep story, allow yourself to be transported to another time and place, letting go of the present moment and drifting towards peaceful slumber. As we transition from the rigorous life of a Spartan warrior, let's journey across the Mediterranean to explore the daily routines of ancient Romans. While not as militaristic as their Spartan counterparts, the Romans had their own unique rhythms and rituals that shaped their days. In ancient Rome, the day typically began at dawn. The Romans, like many ancient civilizations, rose with the sun. This early start was essential for maximizing daylight hours in a world where artificial lighting was limited and expensive. Upon waking, a Roman citizen would perform their morning ablutions. This involved washing their face and hands with water from a basin. Unlike modern bathrooms, most Roman homes didn't have running water. Instead, water was collected from public fountains or wells and stored in large clay containers called amphorae. After cleansing, Romans would don their clothing for the day. For men, this typically meant putting on a tunic, which was a simple garment resembling a long shirt. Over this, they might wear a toga if they were heading out for formal business or public appearances. Women would also wear tunics, often with a stola, a long pleated dress over the top. Breakfast or intaculum was usually a light affair. It might consist of bread dipped in wine, cheese, dried fruit, or leftovers from the previous night's dinner. This meal was often eaten quickly and without much ceremony, as the Romans were eager to start their day's activities. For many Romans, the early morning hours were dedicated to business matters. Wealthy citizens might receive clients in their homes during a ritual known as the salutatio. This was a daily greeting where lower-ranking citizens would pay their respects to their patrons, seeking favors or support. Meanwhile, craftsmen and merchants would open their shops, setting out their wares for the day's trade. The Forum, the central marketplace and civic center of Roman cities, would come alive with activity as people gathered to buy, sell, and socialize. Education was highly valued in Roman society, and children from affluent families would begin their lessons in the morning. Young boys would be escorted to school by a slave called a pedagogus, who was responsible for their safety and behavior. Girls were typically educated at home, learning domestic skills alongside reading and writing. Roman schools were often held in open-air spaces or rented rooms. Students sat on benches or on the floor, writing on wax tablets with a stylus. The curriculum focused on reading, writing, and arithmetic, with older students studying rhetoric and philosophy. By mid-morning, many Romans would make their way to the public baths. These were not just places for cleansing, but important social hubs where people of all classes could mingle. The bathing process was elaborate, involving progression through rooms of different temperatures. First, bathers would enter the tepidarium, a warm room where they would begin to sweat. This was followed by the caldarium, a hot steam room where they would cleanse themselves with oil and a curved metal tool called a strigil to scrape away dirt and sweat. After the hot rooms, bathers would cool off in the frigidarium, a cold pool. This cycle of heating and cooling was believed to have health benefits. The baths were also equipped with exercise areas, libraries, and spaces for socializing, making them a central part of Roman daily life. While at the baths, Romans would catch up on the latest news and gossip. It was a place where business deals were struck, political alliances formed, and social connections maintained. For many, a trip to the baths could last several hours, encompassing exercise, grooming, and socializing. As noon approached, it was time for the prandium, or lunch. This was typically a light meal, often eaten while out and about. Street vendors in Roman cities offered a variety of quick foods, such as bread, cheese, fruits, and vegetables. Wealthier citizens might return home for a more substantial meal, but it was generally not a lengthy affair. The early afternoon in Rome was often dedicated to business and civic duties. The forum would be bustling with activity as legal cases were heard, political speeches were given, and public announcements were made. Citizens might attend these events, participate in debates, or simply observe the proceedings. For those in trade or craft professions, the afternoon was a busy time of production and sales. Workshops would be in full swing, with apprentices learning their trades under the watchful eyes of master craftsmen. The streets would be filled with the sounds of hammering, sawing, and the calls of merchants hawking their wares. As the heat of the day intensified, many Romans would seek shelter indoors. This was a time for rest or indoor activities. Wealthy Romans might retire to their private gardens or courtyards, enjoying the shade and perhaps indulging in a short nap. For those with literary interests, the afternoon provided an opportunity for reading or writing. Roman libraries, both public and private, were well stocked with scrolls on various subjects. Poetry recitals and philosophical discussions were popular pastimes among the educated elite. As the day began to cool, physical activities would resume. The Campus Martius, a large open area in Rome, was a popular spot for exercise and sports. Young men might engage in wrestling, running, or ball games. Military exercises and drills were also conducted here, keeping the city's defenders in good shape. For the wealthy, the late afternoon might involve a visit to their country estates if they were near the city. These villas provided a respite from urban life and were often the site of elaborate gardens and orchards. Here, Romans could enjoy the fresh air and engage in agricultural pursuits as a form of leisure. As the sun began to set, Romans would start to prepare for the most important meal of the day, the cena or dinner. This was a more elaborate affair than the earlier meals and could last for several hours. Wealthy Romans would often host dinner parties, inviting friends and associates to dine with them. The dining room, or triclinium, was set up with couches arranged in a U-shape around a central table. Guests would recline on these couches, propped up on their left elbows as they ate and conversed. This posture was considered the proper way to dine and was a mark of civilization and refinement. The cena typically consisted of multiple courses. It would begin with light appetizers called gustatio, which might include eggs, vegetables, or small fish. This was followed by the primary courses, or primi mensi, featuring various meat and fish dishes. The meal would conclude with the secondi mensi, or dessert course, which often included fresh and dried fruits, nuts, and sweet cakes. Throughout the meal, wine would flow freely, though it was usually diluted with water. Entertainment was an important part of these dinner gatherings. Hosts might arrange for musicians, dancers, or even poets to perform for their guests. Intellectual discussions and debates were also common, covering topics from philosophy to politics. For the lower classes, the evening meal was a simpler affair, often consisting of a porridge made from grains, vegetables, and perhaps small amounts of meat or fish if available. Families would gather to share the meal and discuss the events of the day. As night fell, the streets of Roman cities would gradually quiet down. With limited artificial lighting, most activities ceased after dark. However, some taverns and inns remained open, providing gathering places for those who wished to continue socializing or for travelers seeking lodging. Before retiring for the night, Romans would often engage in a final round of religious observances. Many households had a small shrine dedicated to their household gods, the Lares and Penates. A brief prayer or offering might be made here before bed. And so, as the candles and oil lamps were extinguished, another day in ancient Rome would come to an end. The rhythms of Roman daily life, from the early morning salutatio to the evening cena, reflected a society that valued order, ritual, and the balance between public duty and private pleasure. As we drift off to sleep, let us ponder how these ancient routines both differ from and resemble our own daily lives in the modern world. As we continue our exploration of ancient Roman daily routines, let's delve deeper into the afternoon and evening activities that shaped the lives of these fascinating people. Remember, the Romans divided their day into 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of darkness, adjusting the length of these hours based on the season. After the midday meal or prandium, many Romans would retire for a brief siesta during the hottest part of the day. This practice was particularly common among the upper classes who could afford such leisure time. The siesta usually lasted about an hour, allowing them to rest and escape the intense Mediterranean heat. As the afternoon progressed, Romans would resume their daily activity. For the wealthy, this often meant engaging in social calls or attending to business matters. They might visit friends' homes or receive visitors in their own dwellings. These social interactions were crucial for maintaining and expanding one's network of connections, which was essential for political and economic success in Roman society. Meanwhile, for the working class, the afternoon meant returning to their various occupations. Shopkeepers would reopen their stores, artisans would continue crafting their wares, and laborers would resume their tasks. The streets of Roman cities would once again buzz with activity as people went about their business. One popular afternoon pastime for Romans of all social classes was visiting the public baths, or thermae. These elaborate facilities were more than just places to get clean. They were social hubs where people could relax, exercise, and socialize. A typical visit to the baths would follow a specific routine. First, bathers would enter the apoditerium, or changing room, where they would undress and store their belongings. From there, they would proceed to the tepidarium, a warm room designed to prepare the body for the hotter areas to come. This room was often adorned with beautiful mosaics and sculptures, providing a feast for the eyes as well as comfort for the body. Next, bathers would move to the caldarium, the hottest room in the baths. Here they would sweat profusely, cleansing their pores and relaxing their muscles. Attendants might offer massages or assist in scraping off dead skin with a tool called a strigil. After the intense heat of the caldarium, bathers would cool off in the frigidarium, a room with cold pools for swimming and refreshing oneself. The baths also often included exercise areas, libraries, and gardens, making them true centers of Roman social life. People would spend hours at the baths, not just bathing, but also engaging in conversation, making business deals, or simply enjoying the company of friends and acquaintances. As the afternoon waned, Romans would begin to prepare for the most important meal of the day, the cena, or dinner. Unlike modern practices, the main meal in ancient Rome was typically eaten in the late afternoon or early evening, usually beginning around the 9th hour of the day, about 3 p.m. in our modern reckoning, and potentially lasting for several hours. For the wealthy, the cena was an elaborate affair that could stretch long into the evening. Guests would be invited, and the meal would be as much a social event as a culinary one. Diners would recline on couches arranged around a central table, a practice known as the triclinium arrangement. The meal itself would consist of multiple courses. It might begin with the gustatio, or appetizer course, featuring items like eggs, vegetables, or small fish dishes. This would be followed by the primi mensi, or main course, which often included various meat dishes such as roasted pork, beef, or fowl, accompanied by vegetables and bread. The final course, known as the secondi mensi, consisted of desserts and fruits. Popular desserts included sweet cakes, fresh and dried fruits, and a type of cheesecake called savillum. Throughout the meal, wine would be served, typically mixed with water, as drinking undiluted wine was considered barbaric by the Romans. During these lengthy dinner parties, entertainment was a crucial element. Hosts might arrange for musicians, dancers, or even poets to perform for their guests. Intellectual conversations and debates were also common, covering topics from philosophy and politics to art and literature. For the less affluent Romans, the evening meal would be a simpler affair, often consisting of bread, cheese, vegetables, and perhaps some fish or meat if they could afford it. Families would gather together to share the meal and discuss the events of the day. After dinner, as night fell, most Romans would begin to wind down their day. Oil lamps would be lit to provide illumination, casting a warm glow over Roman homes and streets. Some might engage in quiet activities like reading or playing board games with family members. However, nightlife did exist in ancient Rome, particularly in the larger cities. Taverns and inns would remain open, serving food and drink to patrons well into the night. These establishments were popular among the working class and could be lively, sometimes rowdy places. As we near the end of our exploration of the Roman day, it's worth noting that the streets of Rome could be dangerous at night. Without widespread public lighting, darkness brought increased risks of crime and accidents. As a result, most respectable Romans preferred to be safely at home once night fell. Before retiring for the night, a Roman might offer a prayer to the household gods, known as the Lares and Penates. These deities were believed to protect the home and family, and small shrines dedicated to them were common features in Roman houses. And so, as the oil lamps flickered and the sounds of the city gradually quieted, our ancient Romans would finally retire to bed, bringing an end to another day in the eternal city. Their daily routines, while in many ways different from our own, reveal a society that valued work, leisure, social connections, and the pleasures of good food and conversation, elements that continue to resonate with us even 2 millennia later. As we drift further into the soothing embrace of history, let us turn our attention to the mysterious and captivating world of ancient Egypt. A civilization that flourished along the banks of the Nile River for over 3 millennia, ancient Egypt has left an indelible mark on human history. Picture, if you will, the scorching sun beating down on the golden sands of the desert, while the life-giving waters of the Nile flow steadily, bringing fertility to its banks. It is here, in this land of stark contrasts, that one of the world's earliest and most enduring civilizations took root. The daily life of ancient Egyptians was intrinsically tied to the rhythm of the Nile. The river's annual flood cycle dictated the agricultural calendar, shaping the very fabric of Egyptian society. Let us explore the routines and customs of these ancient people, from the humble farmer to the exalted pharaoh. At the heart of Egyptian society was agriculture. The majority of the population were farmers, whose lives revolved around the cultivation of crops along the fertile Nile Valley. Their day would begin at dawn, as the first rays of the sun painted the sky in hues of pink and gold. Farmers would make their way to the fields, carrying simple tools such as wooden plows and sickles. They would work tirelessly under the watchful eye of the sun god, Ra, tending to crops of wheat, barley, and flax. The hot, dry climate meant that irrigation was crucial, and farmers developed sophisticated systems of canals and basins to distribute the life-giving waters of the Nile. While the men worked in the fields, women typically managed the household and cared for the children. They would grind grain into flour, bake bread, brew beer, and weave linen cloth. The aroma of freshly baked bread would waft through the air, mingling with the earthy scent of the Nile mud used to construct their simple homes. As we move up the social hierarchy, we encounter the artisans and craftsmen. These skilled workers were responsible for creating the beautiful and intricate objects that have captivated the world for millennia. In workshops scattered throughout the cities, sculptors would chip away at blocks of limestone, gradually revealing the forms of gods and pharaohs. Nearby, jewelers would carefully set precious stones into delicate gold settings, creating elaborate pieces fit for royalty. The rhythmic tapping of chisels and the soft scraping of files would form a constant backdrop to their meticulous work. Scribes, held in high esteem for their literacy in a largely illiterate society, would spend their days recording the affairs of the state, religious texts, and historical events. Seated cross-legged on the ground, they would carefully form hieroglyphs on papyrus scrolls using reed pens and ink made from soot and gum. The scribe's work was vital to the functioning of the complex bureaucracy that governed ancient Egypt. Their meticulous records allowed for the efficient collection of taxes, the organization of labor for massive building projects, and the preservation of religious and historical knowledge. As the sun reached its zenith, casting short shadows across the land, Egyptians would retreat to the shade for the hottest part of the day. This midday break, known as the 6th hour, was a time for rest and refreshment. Families might gather to share a simple meal of bread, vegetables, and perhaps some dried fish from the Nile. In the cooler hours of the late afternoon, work would resume. Farmers would return to their fields, while craftsmen and scribes continued their tasks. The markets would come alive as people gathered to trade goods and exchange news. The bustling marketplace would be a riot of colors, sounds, and smells. Vendors would call out, advertising their wares: fresh produce from the fields, finely woven linen, intricate jewelry, and aromatic spices from distant lands. The air would be thick with the pungent scent of spices and the sweet aroma of ripe fruit. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in vibrant oranges and purples, Egyptians would begin to wind down their daily activities. Families would gather for the evening meal, often consisting of bread, vegetables, and occasionally meat or fish for those who could afford it. After the meal, as darkness fell, families might spend time together, sharing stories or playing simple board games like Senet. The soft glow of oil lamps would illuminate their homes, casting flickering shadows on the walls. Religion played a central role in the daily lives of ancient Egyptians. Throughout the day, people would offer prayers and small offerings to the gods, seeking their favor and protection. In the temples, priests would perform elaborate rituals to maintain the cosmic order and ensure the gods' continued benevolence. The rhythm of daily life in ancient Egypt was closely tied to the natural world. The rising and setting of the sun, the flooding of the Nile, and the changing seasons all played crucial roles in shaping the routines and beliefs of the Egyptian people. As we conclude this first part of our exploration into life in ancient Egypt, let us reflect on the enduring legacy of this remarkable civilization. Their monumental architecture, intricate art, and complex religious beliefs continue to captivate our imaginations thousands of years later. In our next segment, we will delve deeper into the lives of the elite, the pharaohs, priests, and nobles who wielded power in this ancient land. But for now, let the gentle flow of the Nile and the whisper of papyrus reeds in the breeze lull you into a peaceful slumber, dreaming of a world long past but never forgotten. As we continue our exploration of life in ancient Egypt, let's delve deeper into the daily routines and social structures that shaped this fascinating civilization. The Nile River, which we touched upon earlier, played an even more crucial role in the lives of ancient Egyptians than one might initially imagine. The annual flooding of the Nile, known as the inundation, was not just a natural phenomenon but a central event in the Egyptian calendar. It typically occurred between June and September, depositing rich silt on the riverbanks and creating fertile farmland. This cycle of flooding was so important that it formed the basis of the Egyptian calendar, dividing the year into 3 seasons: Akhet inundation, Perit growing, and Shemu harvest. During the inundation period, farmers couldn't work in the fields. Instead, they were often called upon for corvée labor, working on state projects such as building monuments or maintaining irrigation systems. This practice ensured that the workforce remained productive year-round and contributed to the grand building projects that still awe us today. Speaking of building projects, let's take a moment to consider the construction of the pyramids. Contrary to popular belief, the workers who built the pyramids were not slaves but paid laborers. Recent archaeological evidence suggests that they were well-fed and even received medical care. The work was undoubtedly hard, but it was seen as a form of national service and a way to ensure a good afterlife. The ancient Egyptians' belief in the afterlife permeated every aspect of their culture. They believed that the soul, or Ba, needed to return to the body each night, which is why mummification was so important. The process of mummification was complex and took about 70 days to complete. It involved removing the internal organs, drying the body with natron salt, and then wrapping it in linen bandages. But life in ancient Egypt wasn't all about preparing for death. The Egyptians also enjoyed various forms of entertainment. Music and dance were popular, with instruments like harps, lutes, and sistrums being common. They also played board games, with Senet being one of the most popular. This game, often found in tombs, was believed to represent the journey of the deceased through the afterlife. Education was highly valued in ancient Egyptian society, although it was primarily available to boys from wealthy families. Children began their education around the age of 4, learning to read and write hieroglyphs. Those who completed their education often became scribes, a highly respected profession in ancient Egypt. The ancient Egyptians were also skilled mathematicians and astronomers. They developed a sophisticated understanding of mathematics, which they used in construction, land surveying, and accounting. Their astronomical knowledge allowed them to create an accurate calendar and predict the annual flooding of the Nile. Let's now turn our attention to the role of women in ancient Egyptian society. Compared to many other ancient civilizations, women in Egypt enjoyed a relatively high status and greater freedoms. They could own property, initiate divorce, and even rule as pharaohs. Notable examples include Hatshepsut, who ruled as pharaoh for over 2 decades, and Cleopatra VII, the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic kingdom. In daily life, women were primarily responsible for household duties and childrearing, but they could also work outside the home. Some became priestesses, others worked as professional mourners, and still others assisted in medical practices. There's even evidence of women working as merchants and engaging in trade. Speaking of trade, ancient Egypt had a complex economy that extended far beyond its borders. While the majority of Egyptians were farmers, there was a thriving merchant class. Egypt exported goods such as papyrus, linen textiles, gold, and grain, while importing luxury items like cedar wood from Lebanon, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, and myrrh from the land of Punt, believed to be located in the Horn of Africa. The ancient Egyptians also made significant advancements in medicine. Their medical knowledge was quite sophisticated for the time, and Egyptian doctors were sought after throughout the ancient world. They understood the importance of cleanliness in preventing infection and used honey as an antiseptic. They even performed complex procedures like brain surgery, as evidenced by skulls found with signs of trepanation. Religion, of course, played a central role in ancient Egyptian life. The Egyptians worshipped a pantheon of gods and goddesses, each associated with different aspects of life in the natural world. Temples were not just places of worship, but also important economic and administrative centers. Priests held significant power and influence in society. One of the most intriguing aspects of ancient Egyptian religion was the cult of Osiris. Osiris was the god of the dead and the afterlife, and his myth formed the basis of much of Egyptian religious belief. According to the myth, Osiris was murdered by his brother Set, but was resurrected by his wife Isis. This cycle of death and rebirth was seen as a metaphor for the annual flooding and receding of the Nile, as well as the promise of eternal life. As we near the end of this segment, it's worth reflecting on the enduring legacy of ancient Egyptian civilization. Their monumental architecture, intricate art, and complex religious beliefs continue to captivate us thousands of years later. The ancient Egyptians' contributions to mathematics, astronomy, and medicine laid important foundations for future scientific advancements. Moreover, their concept of ma'at, or universal balance and order, influenced their legal system and social norms. This principle emphasized truth, justice, and moral righteousness, ideas that continue to resonate in many modern societies. In conclusion, life in ancient Egypt was a complex tapestry of daily routines, religious beliefs, scientific advancements, and social structures. From the farmers tending their fields along the Nile to the scribes recording history in hieroglyphs, from the builders of the pyramids to the priests tending to the gods, each played a part in creating one of the most fascinating and enduring civilizations in human history. As we delve into the daily life of a medieval peasant, we find ourselves transported to a world far removed from our modern comforts. The medieval period, spanning roughly from the 5th to the 15th century, was a time of great social disparity, with the vast majority of the population living as peasants under the feudal system. Let's begin our journey in a typical medieval village, where the sun has just begun to peek over the horizon. The rooster's crow pierces the early morning silence, signaling the start of another long day for the hardworking peasants. Our peasant, whom we'll call John, rises from his straw-filled mattress, which rests on the earthen floor of his small, thatch-roofed cottage. The air inside is thick with the lingering smoke from last night's fire, as the cottage lacks proper ventilation. John's wife, Mary, and their children are also stirring, ready to face the day's labors. John's first task is to tend to the animals. He steps outside, the cool morning air nipping at his skin through his rough, homespun wool tunic. The family's few livestock, perhaps a cow, some chickens, and a pig, are kept in a small pen adjacent to the cottage. John milks the cow, collects any eggs the chickens may have laid, and ensures the animals have enough food and water for the day. Meanwhile, Mary kindles a fire in the hearth, the focal point of their humble home. She begins preparing a simple breakfast of coarse bread and porridge made from oats or barley. The family gathers around the fire, eating quickly before dispersing to their respective tasks. As a peasant farmer, John's primary responsibility is to work the land owned by the local lord. He grabs his rudimentary tools, a wooden plow, a sickle, and a hoe, and heads out to the fields. The walk to the communal farmland can take up to an hour, as medieval villages were often surrounded by vast stretches of arable land. John's day in the fields is long and physically demanding. He plows the earth, plants seeds, or harvests crops depending on the season. The work is backbreaking, performed without the aid of modern machinery or advanced agricultural techniques. The hot sun beats down on him as he toils, with only brief respites for a meager midday meal. Back at the cottage, Mary busies herself with a multitude of tasks. She tends to their small vegetable garden, which provides essential supplements to the family's diet. She might gather herbs for medicinal purposes or to add flavor to their bland meals. The children, old enough to work, assist her or perform other chores like fetching water from the village well or gathering firewood. As the day progresses, Mary turns her attention to textile work. Using a drop spindle, she spins wool into yarn, a time-consuming process that requires skill and patience. This yarn will later be woven into cloth for the family's clothing or potentially sold for a small profit. The rhythm of village life continues around them. The sound of the blacksmith's hammer rings out from his forge, while the miller's wheel creaks as it grinds grain into flour. These specialized craftsmen play crucial roles in the village economy, but most peasants, like John and Mary, are primarily engaged in agricultural work. As the sun begins to descend, John makes his way back from the field. His body aches from the day's labor, but there's still work to be done. He might repair tools, mend fences, or assist with other household tasks before the day is done. The family gathers once more for their evening meal, typically consisting of a thick vegetable soup or pottage, sometimes supplemented with a small portion of salted meat if they're fortunate. Bread, a staple of the medieval diet, accompanies every meal. They eat from wooden bowls using their hands or simple wooden spoons, as forks were not yet common in peasant households. After the meal, there might be a brief period of respite. John may carve wooden utensils or toys for the children, while Mary mends clothing by the light of the fire or a tallow candle. The children might play simple games or listen to stories passed down through generations. As darkness falls, the family prepares for sleep. They say their prayers, a significant part of daily life in the deeply religious medieval world. Then, they retire to their shared sleeping area, often a single room where the whole family sleeps together for warmth and security. This daily routine would repeat itself day after day, with variations based on the agricultural calendar and religious observances. The life of a medieval peasant was one of constant work, punctuated by the changing seasons and occasional village festivities. It's important to note that while this description provides a general overview, the experiences of peasants could vary widely depending on their specific location, the policies of their local lord, and the particular time period within the medieval era. Some peasants might have slightly better conditions, while others faced even harsher circumstances. In our next segment, we'll delve deeper into the societal structure that governed the lives of medieval peasants, exploring their relationship with the nobility and the church, as well as the various obligations and restrictions they faced under the feudal system. As we continue our exploration of medieval peasant life, let's delve deeper into the daily routines and challenges faced by these hardworking individuals. The life of a peasant was far from easy, with long hours of labor and constant struggle for survival. One of the most important aspects of peasant life was the agricultural calendar. The rhythm of their days was dictated by the changing seasons and the demands of crop cultivation. In spring, peasants would begin preparing the fields for planting. This involved clearing the land of debris, plowing the soil, and sowing seeds. The plow was a crucial tool in medieval agriculture. It was typically made of wood with an iron blade and was pulled by oxen or horses. Plowing was backbreaking work, requiring strength and skill to guide the plow through the often rocky and uneven terrain. Peasants would walk behind the plow for hours on end, carefully turning the soil to create furrows for planting. Once the fields were prepared, it was time for sowing. Seeds were precious commodities, and peasants had to be careful not to waste them. They would scatter seeds by hand, walking up and down the furrows and distributing them as evenly as possible. After sowing, they would use a harrow, a wooden frame with iron teeth, to cover the seeds with soil. As spring turned to summer, the focus shifted to tending the growing crops. Weeding was a constant task, as unwanted plants could quickly choke out the valuable grain crops. Peasants would spend long hours bent over in the fields, carefully removing weeds by hand or with simple tools like hoes. Summer was also the time for haymaking. Grass was cut using scythes, then left to dry in the sun. Once dry, it was gathered into haystacks or stored in barns. This hay was crucial for feeding livestock during the winter months when fresh grass was scarce. The busiest time of year for peasants was undoubtedly the harvest season, which typically fell in late summer or early autumn. Every able-bodied person in the village would be involved in bringing in the crops. Men would use scythes to cut down the grain, while women and children followed behind, gathering the cut stalks into bundles called sheaves. These sheaves were then stacked into shocks in the field to dry before being transported to the thrashing floor. Thrashing was the process of separating the grain from the stalks and was usually done by beating the sheaves with flails. This was followed by winnowing, where the grain was tossed into the air to allow the wind to blow away the chaff, leaving the heavier grain behind. After the harvest, peasants had to ensure that a portion of their crop was set aside for next year's seed. They also had to pay their taxes to their lord, often in the form of a share of their harvest. What remained was stored carefully to last through the winter months. Winter brought its own set of challenges and tasks. With the fields dormant, peasants turned their attention to other necessary work. This might include repairing tools and equipment, spinning wool or flax into thread, and weaving cloth. Some engaged in winter hunting to supplement their food stores. Peasant homes were simple structures, usually consisting of 1 or 2 rooms. The walls were typically made of wattle and daub, a mixture of mud, straw, and manure plastered over a wooden frame. Roofs were thatched with straw or reeds. These homes were often drafty and smoky, with a central hearth providing both warmth and a place for cooking. Furniture was sparse and rudimentary. Most peasants slept on straw-filled mattresses placed on the floor or on simple wooden beds. Tables and benches were common, but chairs were a luxury reserved for the wealthy. Storage chests held clothing and other possessions. The diet of medieval peasants was simple and repetitive. Bread was the staple food, often made from cheaper grains like rye or barley rather than wheat. Pottage, a thick stew made from whatever vegetables were available, was another dietary mainstay. Meat was a rare treat, usually reserved for special occasions or when an animal was too old or injured to work. Peasants supplemented their diet with whatever they could forage from the surrounding countryside. This might include berries, nuts, mushrooms, and wild herbs. Many kept small gardens where they grew vegetables like onions, leeks, and cabbage. Some were also allowed to keep a few chickens or a pig, providing eggs and occasional meat. Despite the hardships of their daily lives, medieval peasants did find time for recreation and social gatherings. Sundays and religious holidays provided opportunities for rest and community activities. Village festivals, often tied to the agricultural calendar or religious observances, were times of celebration with music, dancing, and feasting. Education in the formal sense was largely unavailable to peasants. Most were illiterate, with knowledge and skills passed down orally from generation to generation. Children learned by working alongside their parents, gradually taking on more responsibilities as they grew older. The church played a central role in peasant life. The local parish church was not only a place of worship, but